Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about Matthew Mercer's Wizards of the Coast Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, an incredibly interesting book. And specifically, I want to talk about today just one sliver of it, which is Dunamis. So, what is Dunamis? Dunamis is defined by Matthew Mercer in this book as potentiality, the energy, the power of potentialness. Right. So it says that basically, and this is comes off the Everett interpretation, this every world interpretation, where when we make a decision, there's something happens where there is how to explain this. So if we decide, okay, if a lady decides I'm going to break up with this boyfriend or I'm going to stay with this boyfriend, right? That's a huge decision, and the moment that decision is made, many people think, oh, well, that decision was made, and now she decided to break up with that boyfriend, right? And so this world is a world where the two of them are not together, and nothing else is going to happen between them. They will never get married. They'll never have children, or they'll never have or it's unlikely they'll have mutual friends because their worlds have diverged. But if she stayed with him, that's an entirely different world. So basically, the every world theory is that second world exists, and it is just so it exists, and then it comes into being, and and both worlds exist, and all the things that could happen in both worlds exist. So Dunamis is the idea in Dungeons and Dragons that you're taking that potentiality and you're manipulating it. The energy that would go into creating this separate world, you are grabbing it, using it. It's a really Dunamis is this energy of potential, right? And then Dunamancy is the practice of manipulating the energy of potential. Now, listen very closely. I did not use the word magic there, and I didn't on a very specific reason. This Dunamancy is, in my opinion, a very specific choice by Matthew Mercer to take magic out of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, this change would have to be done very slowly, right? So, the reality is, why would this even be being attempted? It's a truly deep, deep subject. I think it's really, really fascinating. So, why would Matthew Mercer want to take magic out of Dungeons and Dragons and replace it with Dunamancy, which is really something that functions exactly like magic, but is not magic in any way? Right? Well, there's a really good reason. So basically, the world is right now separated into three types of people. There's the secular and the sacred, and the last one is the spiritual. So the seculars are people who say either there's no God or I don't, and this is real world. This isn't Dungeons and Dragons, and we're talking about the disposition of Matthew Mercer, and I think a lot of the disposition of a lot of people right there at Wizards of the Coast who agree with Matthew Mercer. They brought him in for a reason. They like his stuff, right? So, and honestly, a lot of people like Matthew Mercer's stuff. He's very popular, and he's been able to establish this very distinct way about his content where let's put it this way, Matthew Mercer has done more to gain followers for Dungeons and Dragons than anyone ever. I would even say more than, except for Gary Gygax. Like, nobody beats Gygax, right? But he's been incredibly powerful as far as bringing people to Dungeons and Dragons. So here's the thing, right? Matthew Mercer is from Hollywood. Hollywood generally is on the secular side. When a Sunday morning rolls around in Hollywood, it's far more likely that you're going to find people on a Sunday morning drinking mimosas at a brunch than they are going to be sitting in a pew with a tie on, right? At a church, or sitting in a pew with a tie on. And this is really, really, it's a huge difference, right? So you have the seculars. They say there is no God, or they say there's no proof that there's a God. No one can prove it, right? Then you have the sacreds who say there's a God, and because I believe that, I believe that things exist outside of the natural world. I believe in the supernatural. I believe that there are miracles. I believe that things can happen that are not bound by science and physics. It's a major, bold statement. Exactly like the secular is a major, bold statement. There's a third grouping. They're spiritualists. Spiritualists will say, I'm spiritual but not religious. I don't think anybody really cares about that group much, and the reason why, and they don't really need to, because basically, spiritualists are like, I believe in supernatural things, but if I'm pressed, I won't make anyone uncomfortable with my belief. I won't stand up strong for my belief for very long. It's not a rigid belief. It's just like personal and just me. No one else needs to believe it. So spiritualists, I don't think really, there are three groups, and I don't want to dismiss spiritualists as not existing, but I do want to dismiss spiritualists as mattering within the discussion. Their beliefs are held so loosely that they can just kind of be, they can drop them at any time, right? And so spiritualists will not argue any point, whereas secularists will argue and say, hey, I think there's distinct disadvantages to believing in a God. And sacreds they'll say, I believe there are very distinct disadvantages to not believing in God. So I believe, it's my opinion, that Matthew Mercer is a secularist, right? And that basically, and that causes a problem, because Matthew Mercer legit loves Dungeons and Dragons. But Dungeons and Dragons has gods, it has deities, it has entire books. Every single edition has had a book dedicated to deities, except 5th edition. 5th edition has never had a deities book, right? So here you see what I was saying, where the seculars are starting to encroach on D&D and saying, hey, it is really odd for us to have deities and gods within Dungeons and Dragons. We're a modern people, we're secularists, right? Why are we saying that we need gods to have magic? Well, I definitely understand their desire to shift into this more secular view and have all the fun of magic without having to deal with, I need to be faithful to a god and my behavior is bound by the strictures of this god. To a modern secularist, that is incredibly unattractive, right? But it's a foundational aspect of Dungeons and Dragons, and you have to deal with it, right? And so here is Matthew Mercer coming in and saying, let's do Dunamis. Let's use the energy of potential to replace magic. Now, he's not saying let's do that all at once. Right now, Dunamis is wrapped in the wrapping paper of magic, and is still being presented as magic. But I am of the strong belief that what you're looking at with Dunamis is a very concerted effort to, I think, if the secularists within Wizards of the Coast had their way, I think paladins and clerics would go the way of the dodo bird, and basically you would just be left with non-magical, non-deity based, non-sacred sources for magic. And I think Dunamis is the first real attempt to do this. Now, I'm an evangelical Christian, right? So you would think that I'd be against this, but I'm actually not. I actually was blown away by, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised, and I'm not necessarily, I hope that there continues to be, actually, yeah, I will say this very clearly. I don't want Matthew Mercer to win. I don't want secularists to win. I don't want paladins and clerics to be swept from the game. I don't want alignment to be swept from the game. These are all things that I think the secularists are coming for in D&D. I would like those things to remain in, right? However, as an evangelical Christian, I'm a part of this nation. I should be heard, and my opinion should be there, right? But the reality is, everybody else has the right to do as they wish with Dungeons and Dragons as well. And Matthew Mercer has earned a right to put forward this book, right? And now everybody gets to say, okay, is this better, right? And that's fine. That's the way the market works. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize what this Dunamis is. I really do think Dunamis it's an initial salvo in making Dungeons and Dragons way more secularist and sweeping out the sacred voice. And if you think I'm wrong, go take a look at the history of Gary Gygax. He was a sacred, right? You'll find right in his biography that, especially near the end of his life, he became quite religious. And there right now is this battle between, and actually it's a good battle. There's no, it's an intellectual battle. It's an emotional battle for the heart of the game. And is the game going to be secularist, or is it going to be sacred? And I have to say, we've had our day for a long time. Fifth edition has done a lot to move this entire game toward, from a sacred foundation to a secular foundation. The biggest one is paladins and clerics no longer need to be good aligned, right? They can be neutral aligned, and that's a big shift, right? You don't need to be lawful good to be a paladin anymore. That's a big shift away from a secularist view and more toward a big shift away from a sacred view and more toward a secularist view. It's very interesting. It really is a very interesting change within all of this. So I think at the end of the day, when you think about it, Dunamis is really, really quite interesting. I'm really fascinated by, how they are moving forward with this. And I would definitely really like to see them very distinctly. I'm glad that the players are going to have the chance to decide what is best and what should be moved forward. And I did want to just take a minute to highlight this, because I think there's this really very distinct intellectual battle happening right now between secularists and sacreds for the future of Dungeons and Dragons. And Dunamis and Dunamancy are a very distinct volley in that back and forth. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful, wonderful millennium.